All right. Is it okay with everybody that we record this whole session? We've got thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, good. So let's roll into this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as we go, I've got certain places where I stop and ask you for questions. Now, some people are in the habit of throwing questions into chat. I cannot pay attention to chat and do this. So don't expect me to go through your questions. When I stop, go ahead and unmute yourself when I ask for questions and join in. And yeah, some people are going to overspeak each other, but I'll choose, hopefully, because when you speak, then your picture shows up. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go through 5 different sections today, and we have 3 exercises. The first is all about the ways that you already listen. Kind of defining what listening already means. Then we're going to go through empathic listening and cognitive empathy. I'm going to talk about the beginner's mind, which is probably a familiar concept to everyone, but I'll go into it. And then I'm going to talk about getting to depth and making a person feel heard. Ordinarily, when I do this workshop in person, I begin with a little exercise, which we're going to do after this first set of slides. Okay. So the ways you already listen. Often you are listening to figure out what to say in response. Your cognition is going through what the person's saying and like bringing up stories or bringing up something to say in response. And oftentimes this is just sort of, I don't know, fraught by your relationship with that person. I take a lot of photos and I didn't realize how great this photo was until I looked at it later. Can you see what's happening? This happens to be the president of the university, and the woman is one of the researchers on one of the teams I was working with. So we can kind of read the body language and the, like, oh yeah, like I am making myself small because you're the important person. And so that's also some cognition that's going through, especially when we're in person, but even if we're just on the phone with somebody, it's like, oh, hey, I shouldn't dig deeper. It might annoy him. He has, little time. And so I'll just listen to him and I don't want to interrupt. And I might make assumptions about what I'm hearing. And assumptions are the biggest problem that we have as designers and as researchers and product owners, and even as leaders and managers. We make assumptions, we make decisions based on those assumptions. And I have written books about why this is so bad. So there's also some social goals. Like you might want to just ease the tension or tell a joke or make them laugh. Like maybe you're you might have a friend who's one of these kinds of people, or maybe you are, who likes to make people laugh. That's just something that you do. So this is what's going through your head. Or maybe you want to impress somebody that you've just met, or kind of make them understand where you are in life. Like I am a student and I want to go to this goal, that kind of a thing, right? So it's just like social goals that we have. There's a book that came out, I think it was January of 2019, but it could be 2018 because my sense of time is skewed now, as is everyone's. But William Miller is a therapist. He's a professor. He teaches people how to become therapists. And this is the only book, he's written a lot of books. This is the only book that he's written for a lay audience. And he says, hey, there are conversational goals that we have. When we're in conversation, often we're trying to persuade somebody to do something or advise them what to do. If you've been out on a walk with a friend, social distance lately, and the advice flies back and forth. You might be analyzing what they're saying or even probing to press for more information, or you might be reassuring them or sympathizing or distracting. And he goes through and he just kind of says, if you're doing any of these things, you're not listening. which is a super important point. I'm also in the esteemed humanity-centered course right now, which is being taught by Vivian Castillo, along with Sakai Farai and Alma, whose last name I cannot remember. But anyway, it's one of the chapters that they did was a little tiny bit about listening. This is what Viviane put on the screen. And these are like your intentions. I want to connect maybe with this other person or fix something. That's the advise thing William Miller was talking about. But I love like the fourth and the fifth one. I like plan an exit strategy from this conversation. Or space out like you might have done once in a while in high school during class. Or question or probe, right? This comes up again. There's things that we're trying to do. And if we're doing any of these things, we're not listening. Okay. There's another way that I look at it. And by the way, I just ran across this image and then re-listened to Brian Lee's talk. This is Brian Lee and Jesse James Garrett at the last UX week in 2018 that we ever got to do. And it was fantastic. And that's all on Vimeo if you guys want to go listen to any of it. But anyway, one of the things that happens is between each presentation, Jesse goes up there and talks to the speaker and asks them a little bit about what they talked about, which is fantastic. Because most MCs are all like, okay, great. Thank you, Brian. Now we have Susan, right? And then like Brian's balloon just gets popped and we're like, okay, let's not pay attention anymore in our heads cognitively to what Brian had said. And so he does this wonderful conversation, but even when we're trying to do something important, oftentimes we stay at explanations. We stay at preferences and opinions. A lot of our research stays at explanation, preferences, and opinion, or generalizations, or often our research will go off into conjecture land, like, what would you do if? And so people have to do make-believe. So there's a lot of things that are going on as the parts of speech, as the parts of listening that aren't actually what we're after. So I want to, given that, this is the little exercise I like to run at the beginning. Given that, I want to do just an example of a natural conversation. I would love to have two people volunteer to just chat with each other about like one of these topics. Can I have, I'm going to stop sharing for a little bit. Actually, let me let you read those topics first. I'll pick out two volunteers and then we're going to throw this back up there because as they chat, the rest of us are going to write down kind of some of those things that we just went through. And I know that we went through those fast. I've got little notation of them, but just note kind of like what's being said, what types of things going on. And you who are volunteering, try to ignore the rest of us and just chat like normal. So let me see, does anybody want to raise their hand or, you can do it visually? Who wants to volunteer? Please don't be shy. We don't want to take too much time finding volunteers.
I'm happy to volunteer.
Yay, okay. And Natalie, okay, Rachel too. All right, Rachel and Natalie, pleased to introduce you two. I am going to stop, I'm going to reshare so the rest of us have that little list. But you guys can pick out one of these topics, kind of hold it in your mind. I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to ask you to go ahead and start chatting.
Natalie, one of these topics in particular seem more intriguing than the others?
I have gone to eat at a restaurant and I've watched a movie that I can talk about. Do you have any preference?
So I haven't gone to eat at a restaurant, so I'd love to know, what was that like?
Yeah, it was enjoyable. So a new restaurant opened near my house. I live in Bristol in England, and we were keen to try it out, and it was very safe feeling. Like you kind of you had this like kind of track that you were on in and out of the restaurant and to the bathroom and back from the bathroom with your mask on all the time. and scanning in using a QR code on the way in, and
Oh, wow.
using hand sanitizer every time you, yeah, so that's how it is here. But we're pretty able to get out and go to restaurants. I mean, how is it where you are? Restaurants not open yet?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado. The restaurants are open yet. I haven't been yet just because I did get COVID and it was horrible.
So sorry.
And so I'm like a little bit hesitant to take that next step. But it sounds like, I mean, I actually haven't looked into it, but it sounds like what you're describing, there's more process in place. You're talking about the QR codes, and you mentioned something about a track.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Like it's marked on the floor, kind of. In different places I've been in, they do it different ways. So they might kind of like move chairs and tables to kind of make you move a certain way around the restaurant, or just mark it on the floor with tape was how it was here. Some places go the whole hog and they have like stickers printed and stuff. But yeah, it can be any kind of way. COVID
dragging a bunch of animals through a track into like where they're supposed to go to the next pin.
Yeah, and there's this whole kind of like, oh no, after you, no, I insist, please, after you, kind of thing. But it's, you know, it's nice. COVID rates have been really low here, I have to say, where I am. So like I haven't had it, and nobody I know has had it really. So I think I'd be feeling like you, maybe more trepidation if I had.
Yeah, I live in a college town, and so the university has, or actually the public health department for the city told all residents 18 to 22 to isolate for 2 weeks.
Oh wow!
Because we had such a spike after the college students were back. So
yeah,
so it was good.
Yeah. We've pretty much just locked all of our university students in their dorms and not letting them out, and like sending food into them. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's kind of a scandal.
Yeah, that's essentially kind of what happened at CU University. Is they were like, stay there. We'll like make like you can go out for food unless like you've been exposed to someone, and then we'll like get the food to you. Like we'll figure it all out. Yeah.
It's wild. Like I wouldn't want to be a student right now. I wouldn't know what I was paying my tuition fees for.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience. So I have to know, so you told me about the restaurant experience. Was the food good? And what did you eat?
I'm so glad you asked, because I actually, yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about. So I had a pizza and I was very happy with my pizza, but my girlfriend had a polenta and beef shin stew.
Ooh.
And the polenta was like, you know, I never thought I'd say this, but it was too creamy. It was extremely creamy, like a lot of butter, a lot of milk. And like, you know, we've been in our house kind of like eating store cupboard food for 6 months now. To eat something so decadent and to have like 2 glasses of wine, I felt terrible the next day.
Oh my God. We have come to the end of our exercise. We're just getting into this though.
We've been making pizza at home.
Oh, very jealous.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. And I told myself I was not going to say you guys anymore. So I'm going to stop share and say, thanks, you both. Wow. Rachel, super sorry to hear about COVID.
Oh, it's getting better.
Okay.
But it has been 6 months.
I hear it goes like up and down and up and down.
Yeah. It's a strange thing. I've never experienced anything like it.
Oh my God. Oh my God. And wow, I can totally understand, like 2 glasses of wine and super creamy polenta. I would not be surviving that restaurant.
Yeah, very, very sick the next day.
Yeah. God. What a surprising thing to come out of that experience. Not what was on the plan. So, does anybody else want to volunteer some of the things they might have noticed during conversation? Maybe I'll get it started. First of all, Rachel started out like a researcher. So like, what was that like going to the restaurant? And she actually she went back, she reflected like, oh, you said QR codes. And you talked about the track. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? So there's a little bit of like the researcher in there doing the questioning and probing, which was really cool to see. And then Anybody else find anything in the early part of our conversation? Unmute. Yeah.
To say Rachel gave an explanation of why she hasn't eaten out. Very valid, but very
Yes.
quickly, like we're talking about eating out, like you haven't eaten out because you had COVID. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There was some scene setting. Both people were like explaining like where they were, what the scenario was like, and you can't avoid that. But yeah, explanation going on. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was going to say the scene setting for me stood out, in the first minute, right? Rachel didn't ask Natalie where she was, but Natalie kind of responded with like, hey, the nature of our conversations right now, we don't know where anyone really is. So I thought it was great that Natalie kind of stepped in and said, hey, here's my context, here's where I'm at. And then Rachel responded with like, yeah, here's where I'm at. This is my context. This is where I live, which is not apparent from the virtual environments that we're connecting in today. So
yeah, exactly. Nice, good. Did anybody notice any opinions?
I was just gonna say something about that. My ears perked up when Natalie was expressing an opinion about dorm life, students in dorms, and imagining what that would be like. And also the opinion about the decadence of the food, but the but the thing about dorm life and campus life these days in particular is what caught my attention the most.
Yeah. I mean, what would they be paying their fees for type of thing? And yeah, exactly. There was also Rachel's idea that, hey, in Boulder, they made the 18 to 22-year-olds quarantine, which was good, which is an opinion, right? Yeah, cool. Anyone else?
I also had heard Natalie say, oh, this is what I wanted to talk about. And so there probably was some time before she said that she was thinking about it, like, when will the conversation get back to this?
Right. That was beautiful. Nicely done, Sarah. Yay. Anyone else want to add anything? We good? Yeah, Bernadette?
Yeah, I saw Rachel got Natalie to laugh, so that was good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I can't remember what it was now, but I saw her doing a good belly laugh.
Yes, we all need a good belly laugh right now. I think we're all trying to search for that. Nice, nicely done. So given, like, what did I use, about 5 minutes of introduction of these things, you're aware of them. And I think this awareness is what we build our deep listening skills on. Noticing what's happening in conversations. Sometimes I introduce this as you're never going to have any fun conversations again. Because you'll be going like, oh yeah, there's the explanation. Oh, look, she's scene setting, But I will explain later how you actually will be able to have fun conversations. It'll be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and share again. And let's get into empathic listening and cognitive empathy. So being able to walk in somebody's shoes is a phrase that we use in English. And there's probably similar phrases in a lot of other languages. I would love, like, throw some of those, if you have another similar one, throw it into the chat so that we can see it in another language. Being able to take somebody else's perspective or see through their eyes, that's another phrase that we use. And that's how we describe ourselves, as being able to understand somebody deeply. And so my cartoonist for the book, that's Brad Colbo, if you ever want to look at some of his other work, is fantastic. And so I was so lucky to get to work with him. He has us rooted into the soil. And being able to understand someone means we have to dig down there and see what the roots are, hopefully not breaking any of the roots. You know, the shovel, the roots. I'm like, I don't know, is this going to work? Maybe. Okay. But anyway, we need to dig to get to empathy. So a lot of us are used to either natural conversation or doing an interview. We do interviews for a lot of different reasons. We interview when we're doing research for our work. We interview when we're looking for a job or when we're trying to look for a candidate for a job. We interview when we're helping the neighborhood newspaper put together a little article, right? We interview a lot. There's a lot of different reasons or uses of that word. But again, interview is going to be using a lot of those conversational goals. We've got a little list of things that we want to set out to learn. And one of the things about listening is that it is not an interview because we don't have a list of things we're setting out to learn. We know nothing about this person and we're trying to learn the person. So there's no list of goals that we're trying to set out to learn. I'm gonna go deeper into that so that I've just taken away your handrails and I'll give you a handrail back later. So listening session is actually exactly empathic listening. Empathic listening, I will describe a little bit later, but first I want to say, oh my God, there's so many types of empathy. And it's like everybody has a different definition, and when they're in meetings together, like your boss might be saying, screw empathy, we don't have time for it. He might be talking about something called emotional contagion, or somebody on your team might be thinking of it as empathic concern. So we've got 8 different definitions here, and I'm going to zero in on number 4 and number 6 for a little bit. Aesthetic empathy is actually the place where the word empathy came from. It was in Germany in the 1800s. And apparently some people who were into art wanted to understand more about the art they were looking at by feeling what it's like to be the subject of that art piece. So if it was a human, they were trying to feel like what that human was feeling like. I don't know if they did it if the art was about a landscape. That part was not recorded in history, but that was the place where it came from. Then I recently learned in the humanity-centered course from Sakai that there's a woman in the early 1900s who flipped it and said, like, let's not sort of feel in, let's actually flip it and try to understand somebody. Let them feel, put their feelings on us. And this is where feelings started becoming associated with the word empathy. Aesthetic empathy, that's that kind of empathy around the artwork, is no longer used. However, it does still stand in 1 or 2 dictionaries as the definition of empathy, which is why confusion still reigns. Number 6, projective empathy. That's if I were in their shoes. And we already teach our kids, hey, empathy is not about you being them and you doing things differently than them because they did it wrong and you're judging them. It's you being them in their shoes, you being an actor and acting and thinking as if you are them. So these 2, I'm taking off the list of 8 types of empathy. And I'm actually replacing them with some other types of empathy that have come up more recently. And so I want to dive in, though. I'm going to dive into number 4, empathic listening. I have Dr. Brene Brown listed there because I want to give her like huge kudos. But let's look at emotional contagion first. So there have been books written such as Against Empathy or essays by someone named Don Norman in the user experience area who they think of it only as feelings. And the word for it is actually emotional contagion, trying to like either catching an emotion from someone else or causing someone to feel an emotion. So when you hear somebody say, hey, do you feel me? that's kind of like, do you feel my emotion? Do you get it? Do you see what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling in this spot, which is actually working its way into cognitive empathy. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There's a lot of there's a lot of background here, and it may be too much to catch all at once, but this idea of feel me could often become quite simplified to like, oh, look, I can see that person's emotion, and maybe I'm like understanding that emotion. I can feel that emotion too. Causing someone though to feel an emotion, this happens all the time. If you've ever gone to a movie and found yourself crying, that was intentional. Right? The directors, the actors, they all wanted you to cry there. They're causing you a reaction. This is emotional contagion. If you have ever like put on a playlist for a party or a dinner party or something, you're trying to set an emotional feeling, a mood, right? That's an emotion. So you're trying to cause that to the people that you've invited to your dinner party or your party. You may even do that to yourself. Like, you know, you've got to go work out and you're like not in the mood, but you got to do it. And you're going to force yourself by putting on certain set of songs that energize you. So you're doing emotional contagion to yourself in a way. In software, in solutions that we are creating and designing, these are known as either bright patterns or dark patterns. Dark patterns are the more well-known because there's a lot of manipulation going on. Anytime you sit down on some sort of social media or any kind of a site and there's all these other little flashing things, go to YouTube, like, oh, click me, click me, click me. And then you find that you've been there for way too long and you're not getting the work done that you were supposed to do before dinner. That's a dark pattern. It's a manipulation. It wasn't what you intended. But there's also bright patterns, people trying to use emotional contagion to help you change a habit, to help you maybe fall asleep better or faster, to help you handle when your kids are all yelling at you, right? There's bright patterns and helpful things as well. So I think that that's important to note, that dark patterns does have a cousin. So let's now go back to that empathic listening. So empathic listening is what most people mean when they say empathy, who have been working in the empathy space. They mean empathic listening. Empathic listening is helping a person feel heard. That phrase, feel heard, you're like, oh, yeah, that doesn't happen to us very often. It is a rare thing. And when it does, you're filled with this energy or light, or I don't know, sometimes tears come out of my eyes. It's like, wow, this person has understood me exactly. Even this morning, I was just chatting with Anna and she said something about how we were doing everything online and how you've got to be prepared for each of your sessions. And she like listed all the things in my head. I'm like, wow, I feel heard. Even though I didn't say any of these things, she just like intuited it telepathically. But empathic listening actually has steps to it. And so this is a little shot from an animation that RSA made to join with an audio recording of one of Dr. Brene Brown's talks, where she discusses empathic listening. So empathic listening, what she's trying to do in this talk is describe how empathy is not sympathy, or empathic listening is not sympathy. So the first thing that we do in empathic listening is that we have to recognize that the other person has something going on. Now, often people will say, recognize that somebody has an emotion, but that's not all. Somebody might be like hesitating, and lots of thinking might be going on. It's not necessarily emotion. It might be caused by emotion or causing an emotion, but it's not just emotion here. Something going on is the phrase I like to use. So recognize that somebody has something going on and notice it. That's actually kind of hard for some of us. especially in relationships that we've had for a long time. So here's a little check for ourselves. Remind yourself that that's something that's going on for them is their valid truth. They have had years of experience. Even if they're a toddler, they have a whole lifetime, much shorter than ours, but they still have a whole lifetime of experience. And it is their truth. They are having this thinking, they're having this emotion, they're having some sort of decision going on because of a series of events that have brought them to this moment. And if you say, don't cry, or if you say, don't worry, you are invalidating their experience, their something. So instead of saying, don't worry, or don't cry, or, whatever, right? Can I tell you some advice? Don't say that. Instead, just say, oh, hey, I see that you are, whatever the something is. That is your offer to listen. That is you saying, in whatever phrasing that you like to use, however many sentences you need to say it, that you just notice, you recognize it's valid. This is true. It's happening. It comes from somewhere. And I see it in you. And I'll listen to you. And if that person takes you up on that invitation and starts speaking about their something, then you listen and you stay out of judgment and you make them feel heard. And the rest of today's little course is a taste of how to do that. That is what I call a listening session. The first 3 steps are what launch you into a listening session if that person accepts your invitation to listen. And this is when you're in the moment with somebody, okay? So I want to stop here real quick and ask if there's any questions about this set of things. I've got a few more things to say about logistics. Anyone? Okay, maybe we're good. All right. I'm going to go on to logistics. It's empathic listening is always one-on-one. You can't do it in a group setting. You can't do it with a couple of other people listening in. What it is a relationship between you and one other person. I've heard people say, oh yes, we do group sharing, and that's where empathy happens. Like, that's not where empathy is going to happen. People will feel vulnerable. It is hard to get past that and to get into depth when a whole group of people are listening. So the group sharing does benefit from the first step, like recognizing and acknowledging that the something going on is totally valid. So one-on-one is what's important about this. And when you're not doing it sort of in the moment with a person, when you're doing it for research or some sort of relationship development, I always do it remotely. So this is where it's really amazing that with this pandemic that came along, people will ask, well, how are we going to conduct research? Like, this is the perfect time to conduct deep listening, because this is how it works. And this is how you always do it, pandemic or no. You get on a phone or you get on Zoom with no video and you listen. Okay, so that's empathic listening, which is also commonly called empathy, plain old, by people who are involved in the field. Okay, there's also something called cognitive empathy. And I haven't, by the way, I should probably talk about some of the others, like number 8, I want to bring up, which is compassion. Compassion is often thrown out there as being better than empathy. I think that's what Don Norman's essay was about, if you have read that. And it is just a type of empathy. It's called empathic concern. And that is, I understand their situation and want to do something for them. The I understand their situation has to come from empathic listening, though, with those 4 steps. You can't just make assumptions. All right, so cognitive empathy is all about consciously trying to understand what their inner voice is saying to that person. What's going on in their head? What's it like to be them? This is how we walk in somebody's shoes, by understanding their inner thinking, by understanding their emotional reactions, and by understanding the guiding principles that they use to make decisions. And again, back to that assumption thing, oftentimes when we are at work, even when we are in relationships, we make assumptions about people and we try to walk in their shoes, and we're completely wrong because we have not spent time developing cognitive empathy. This is the most powerful argument that you can use at work for doing this kind of research, especially now. We are making a lot of assumptions based on surface level types of understandings that we have about the people that we're hoping to support. Whether these are people in our groups that we're trying to support at work, or whether these are people that we're trying to support with tools that we're making. So we develop cognitive empathy via empathic listening so that we can understand what's going on inside that person's head. Then after we've developed that, we can apply that cognitive empathy. We can be an actor and think that person's thoughts and have their emotions and decide based on their guiding principles in a context just like that person. Then we are walking in their shoes. Okay, so here's a little equation that I use. We use empathic listening to develop cognitive empathy over time. Time is a part of this equation because this is not something we can do quickly. This is something that we touch upon every time we can. Often every time we can means every other year, every 5 years. Or if we're in a relationship or we're trying to understand our stakeholders, we're doing it every time I can get on the phone with that stakeholder. I'm building a connection. I'm listening to them. I'm understanding their concerns. I'm understanding how they think, how they make decisions. And they're noticing that they're feeling heard, and they're starting to trust you back and offer their listening as well. And this is what creates a trust relationship. So this equation, use empathic listening to develop cognitive empathy over time. We can do this not only with our coworkers and our stakeholders, but also the people that we're trying to support with what we're creating at work. We can also do this with family. It's harder because we have established understanding of what that person thinks, and we might be operating on assumptions, or that person may have changed. For gosh sake, we change all the time. So it's part of the reason why relationships fall apart is that we hold somebody rigidly in a way that they were thinking in the past. So I want to stop again and see if there is any questions all about empathic listening and cognitive empathy.
I have one question in the chat. Narisa, maybe you want to unmute yourself and ask it.
Let's see. Hi. I've just joined a new team, and I've been thinking a lot about how to create relationships with them, and feeling like, hey, jumping into stakeholder interviews isn't quite right yet. So it's great to kind of hear this. It's a confirmation of like, to build a relationship, the base of respect and empathy on the team. But wonder what your thoughts on, especially in this remote world, like what are some key questions or scene setting for us to create that relationship, especially since I'm a UX designer and I want to be creating this foundation with researchers and game designers so that we can learn how to be empathetic listeners to our players going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a really great study with a game company once, which was fabulous, because you can get really into people's heads. So you mentioned stakeholders, and it is not too early. It is never too early. You've just joined. Start setting up calls with people. Maybe make them over lunch. So you're both eating on the phone. It's a little more relaxed. But what you can do is ask, hey, I'm new on this team. What's been going through your mind over the past couple of months? What's been keeping you up at night is another way to say it. What's been of concern, or what are you interested in? Bunch of different ways to start that conversation. And I'll teach you guys a little bit more about how to follow it. And there I go with you guys again. It's hard habit to drop. So I'll teach you how to do it. And I also talk about it in my book, Practical Empathy. And I go into great depth in the online courses that I teach. So there's a little bit more to it than what we can touch on here, but I'm going to touch on something. Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck. Have fun.
I had a quick question.
Uh-huh.
It really stuck out to me when you talked about how it's a one-on-one and not necessarily in a group setting. And I think that was really resonant because I think I've always had the expectations that anybody should be able to pick up empathic listening, even in a group setting, but that explains maybe why my expectations are different. So do you have any advice on how to bring at least elements for that into group settings? I mean, we're not really in person anymore. That could change, but even remotely, like right now we're in a group.
Right.
So like with team meetings and things like that.
Yeah. I think the first two steps of empathic listening, which is making sure that you recognize when something's going on for someone. You might not be able to do that so well if everybody is just hiding behind their screen and not live, because the video is going to help you when, you've got these little, like maybe squinting or looking off at this other screen that, what's going on for you? As there's a question, hey, it looks like you've got something going on there. You want to share it with us what's going on in your mind, what you're thinking, right? Just catch it right there and recognize that it's valid. Don't start with like, oh, hey, Mike, could you pay attention here? Which is like stopping them from doing that inner thinking that they're doing, and just maybe see if that works, or even just go round robin, have one person look at the next person and say, let's just kick this meeting off with a little bit of what's been going on for you. And instead of, we could do that as a group and everybody chat, or do it round robin, depending on how big your group is, where one person asks one person, that person asks the next person, that person asks the next person. So what's been on your mind lately? What's been going on for you? Or do it more narrowly. I'll tell you a little bit more about this today. Does that help? All right. Okay, we're gonna.
I have.
Oh, yeah. Okay, go for it.
It's also a little more of an echo of the questions that's in the chat. You did mention that it's preferable when it's just a conversation that's happening over the phone, and I wonder why that is, as in why it is preferable.
Yeah. For relationship building, it doesn't matter as much. But when you're doing this as a one-off with people as a part of research, oftentimes, and I go into this in my book and in the course, so I can't spend too much time on it, but the one little thing is oftentimes there's an authority relationship. You are the person running a study, you are the authority, and so the person who's with you, especially visually, will either try to impress you or try to maybe be telling you things that they think you want to hear. And without the video, that authority relationship disconnects, and you can build up a human-to-human relationship instead. Okay, hopefully that helps. Yeah. I know it's a really strange thing. There's a couple of strange things about listening, which that is one of the key ones. One of the things I tell people is that in your youth, when you first had your first love, You may have spent a lot of time on the phone with that person. Maybe you were texting with that person. Maybe you weren't like face to face all the time, and you were growing your connection when you were not face to face. You were able to talk about things a little bit more deeply, like sort of push a little thing out there and see how the other person reacts without having your face there too. So that's another analogy.
Sorry, I just have another question to add to that. So I'm also like studying to be a therapist on the side. And I'm wondering how this would then play out in that space, because then the agency and the power dynamic in that space goes away. But would that then contribute to someone willing to share more?
It does. From what I've understood, and I can't speak as a therapist, but from what I've understood, it does take that away, that power dynamic away. It really helps to be able to connect person to person. However, in a therapy setting, I'm not sure the person, I don't know if that answer really agrees, and you may want to ask that same question in that field of study, because maybe that person's coming there like, you are the authority to help me mentally, and so I need some sort of authority at some point. Right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, go forward a little bit. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about something called the beginner's mind. How many people have heard that phrase before? The beginner's mind? Okay, yeah. I would say a lot of people have heard it. What does it really mean? Well, people talk about like, just simplify yourself. Well, I need an analogy. So the analogy for that is a toddler. And hopefully you've been around a toddler and you've had time with that toddler enough where the toddler starts asking you why questions. And you get into that whole string of, well, why this? And you explain it. Well, why that? You explain it. Maybe you trying to get them to do something like finish the milk in your sippy cup. Well, why? And you explain nutrition and why that. And you explain how the stomach works and why, why is there a stomach in there? You explain that. And then you keep getting the whys until often you get to the point where you're like, I have to stop this because I said so. So toddlers are amazing for asking why. However, now that I've spent all that time on that little why example, I want to take a step back and I want to say that's not the most beautiful thing about toddlers. The most beautiful thing about toddlers is that they're not embarrassed about what they don't know. We have spent our lives learning and proving that we have learned something, and then proving that we can apply what we've learned and helping out by applying what we've learned. We've spent our lives doing this. And so we've built up this whole structure of our own understanding of self around what we know. And to drop that, and to say, I don't know you. I don't know you whom I would like to listen to. To drop it entirely is hard. It's very hard. The toddler can drop it because she's not embarrassed about not knowing, not having this whole structure of knowledge. She doesn't know that it's embarrassing to not have the answer, right? So when you're in conversation with the toddler's never going to say, oh yeah, me too, I've done that, or I've felt that way. They're never going to say that. When we're listening to someone, often we'll say that. And I'm not going to say that when you're listening, you shouldn't do that. There's a certain level that you'll take it to. But what you want to do is wash away most of that knowledge that you have. Wash away, step away from that structure for a little bit. It's actually quite freeing to like get out of that structure and go like, I'm over here and I'm just listening to you. And I'm like trying to understand you and your thinking, as opposed to look at it from within the structure that I have around me. Okay, so not embarrassed about what you don't know is a super important part of the beginner's mind. Being able to look at it with fresh eyes, being able to take away that structure. That's what they mean by simplify yourself. Go away from all that experience that you have and just sip this new thing. Feel it, taste it. So one of the things that I say is, especially when you're in a listening session with, if you're doing some research, or even if you're listening with a stakeholder, you're not a researcher. You don't have a goal that you're trying to prove or disprove. You don't probe. And probing is kind of our superpower. As we heard, we were in our very first session, we were demonstrating some of the superpower there. It's like, we're really good at asking questions and getting people to talk. And like, yeah, we like to demonstrate that because it's fun, and it's fun to get people to open up, and we can do that pretty well. But in a listening session, we want to stay out of authority. We don't want to be the person in the white lab coat. We don't want to have that power dynamic that I just spoke about with the questions. We want that dynamic to go away, and we just want to appear as another human being with this human being. This is what helps them open up to go to depth. This is the difference between an interview and a deep listening session. The other analogy that often I'll hear is like, oh, I'm like an explorer. I'm just going into this person's mind and exploring what it is. And I don't want to use that word either. I know I'm like mincing words, like saying don't use researcher, don't use explorer, but truly it's about a mindset. And if you're in the explorer mindset, a part of the explorer mindset is like, oh, I'm going to lead a search and I'm going to find riches, and I'm going to bring those riches back to wherever I'm going back to, which is quite colonial in mindset, right? So we're not an explorer either. What we are is someone who just is going to listen, to bear witness to this other human, to make this human a human, to make this human be, to make them feel heard. That's what the listening deeply empathic mindset is. Okay. This is a picture of some stone artwork down out of Bluff, Utah, from 600 years ago. And we can understand a little bit and bear witness to those people having existed. So that's why I wanted to use that photo there. Because they're bearing witness to the fact that this other person exists, this other person has history, their own experiences, their own way of thinking. And I want to hear that. So listening session, I like to make the analogy, it's like putting on a really heavy hat. Maybe the hat is cute, but it's still heavy. And it makes your neck muscles work to kind of hold it up and balance it there. And at first, you can only put it on your head for a minute or two, and you have to take it off and like, you know, stretch your muscles out. So it's not something that you do all the time. You're not going to all of a sudden be like always a listener. I am not always a listener. In fact, right now I am not listening. I am teaching. That's different. So the empathetic mindset is something that I think about. Oh, hey, I'm going to reach for the hat. I'm going to put it on. And I'm going to like simplify myself, go get rid of everything that I know and just witness this person and understand them, and try to see if I can get an understanding of their deep inner thinking, their emotional reactions, and their guiding principles within a certain purpose or context. I'm doing that with stakeholders. I'm doing that with coworkers. I'm doing that with participants in my studies. I'm trying, and I've been slightly successful, to do that with people in the family. It's very hard because we have baggage, right? So thinking of it as a heavy hat you can go, oh yeah, like I put it on for a little bit here and I'll have to take it off soon, but then I'll put it on again. I have to take it off soon, and then I'll put it on again and I can listen for like another extra minute, right? Keep practicing, build up those muscles. Just like when you're training to do something physical, you might build up muscles, because if you just try to put it on and keep it on for too long, you're going to injure yourself. So try to build up those muscles by practice. I'm going to talk about practice at the very end. Okay. So getting to depth, I've mentioned depth a few times, and let's talk about how we get there, okay? It's a lot like following someone when you're hiking. And if you haven't gone hiking, it's like following someone when they're taking you on a tour of their neighborhood. You're following them. And even if it doesn't seem associated with the topic that you'd like to find out about, it's on their mind and it's associated for them most of the time. So you follow them. And you don't stop and say, well, wait, we just passed this lake or we just passed this church. Tell me what you think about that lake or that church. That's interrupting their mind. That's asking them to give you an answer about something they may not have any thinking about. If they passed that lake or they passed that church and they did have a lot of thinking about it, they would have probably launched into it. Unless they were super busy talking about this mountain over here, in which case you're like, okay, we passed that lake, I'll just jot down lake. And then when they're done talking about the mountain, I'll say, well, earlier we passed that lake. Oh yeah, okay, so let me tell you all about that lake, right? And then they'll dive in and tell you all about that. That's what a listening session is. It's all about following someone. So you have no list of questions. There are 3 things that we want to listen for at depth. So we went through what I call surface level thinking, the surface level explanations, the opinions and preferences, statements of fact, and generalizations and conjecture. So let me just give you an explanation of explanation. It's like how I do something or how something works or why it works that way, how it got to be that way. The word how is very associated with explanation. Generalization, that might be another word I can define for you. That's when somebody speaks about their inner thinking, but only like as applied to everything. So if I ask somebody, hey, you went to the airport last Tuesday for a trip to St. Petersburg. What went through your mind as you were trying to get to the airport that morning? And they answer about, well, every time I go to the airport, I'm always trying to find the closest in parking. So every time, so that's generalization. It's not about last Tuesday in the St. Petersburg trip. It's about every time I go. Okay, some people have a habit of speaking in generalizations. It's very interesting. Also, we talked about these other things that go through your mind when you're trying to listen that sort of interrupt your listening, maybe analyzing or probing or questioning, right? Okay, so at depth, we have 3 things: inner thinking, we have emotional reactions, and we have guiding principles. And this is why I like to talk about empathy, like that empathic listening as something going on, because it can be any of these 3 things. It isn't just the emotional reactions. So inner thinking, you've got that little voice, right? And you're like, oh man, I just spilled coffee on my shirt. So your inner voice is all like, okay, am I gonna appear on anything where that stain would be embarrassing, or can I just finish this thing that I'm doing? Yeah, no, I'm just gonna, okay, so that's like a little inner voice. Right? It's that thinking that you're doing to yourself, talking to yourself in a way. Sometimes we don't even use words when we're doing it. And guiding principles, I'm going to get into in just a second, but they're basically how we make decisions. So listening deeply is about getting to this level. And the reason we have to get to this level is that it's the definition of cognitive empathy. So if we're going to form cognitive empathy, we have to understand people's inner thinking, emotional reactions, and guiding principles. We can't just understand their explanations of how something works, or their preferences or opinions or generalizations about things, or conjecture about the future. We can't just, tell them jokes and expect to understand them, right? We need to get to depth to build cognitive empathy. Okay, so little definitions, the inner thinking. I also like to use all sorts of other words. I fooled with reasoning, but then people thought it meant logic. Pondering is the closest I can come to inner thinking that might work for people. There might be other words in other languages that work super well. To mean that inner chatter. It's the active thought process. It's kind of like the indecision even, or the workarounds that you're coming up with, or the wherefores and whys of doing something in debate that you've got going on. A reaction is the emotion or the feeling. It might cause more emotions. It might cause more inner thinking. Some of your inner thinking might cause an emotion. How many people start thinking about what's going to happen in the near future with society, and then it starts causing you emotion? Okay, they're all linked. And a guiding principle is basically a little rule that you follow. It's an instruction that you use for making decisions. So if anybody has one of those vacuum cleaners called a Roomba, it's got a bunch of decisions in there about navigating a room and cleaning it up. And when it comes to this place where its sensors see walls, like right here, it has a little rule for like turning around so that it gets out of the corner of the room, right? This is what a guiding principle is in a way. It's our little operating instructions. Okay, you'll start to notice them. It's really interesting. So let's look at some examples. Here's an example about inner thinking. And here, see, I've used the word reasoning, right? There's a lot of different words we can use to mean it. I decide not to pull off the interstate. So obviously I'm driving a car because I can get hit on the side of the road, and there's a ravine that I can tumble into, and I can't see. Whoa, okay, we're just diving into this situation that this person is in and she can't see, and okay, now we're a little scared. The next one, I test if he's really following me by crossing the street and watching if he does too. It's interesting how much you can understand of a context just by looking at somebody's inner thinking. Wow. Here's some examples about reactions. I feel worried about the possibility the person I rear-ended is injured. Okay, like maybe even panicked. I feel dazed by the surreal effect of the deer's head and antlers rolling past my car window. So wow, there's like a near miss hitting a deer or something. Okay, some guiding principles. I believe it's important for drivers to pay attention and not get distracted by texting or reading texts while driving. It's a little rule. And in fact, this person brought it up because she's teaching her daughters how to drive. And this is a rule she wants them to have as an operating instruction also. Second one, I finished doing my swim workout even though I'm shaking, because it will make it less scary the next time I come to the pool. Something must have happened that scared this person. And the little guiding principle is, well, I gotta keep doing it or do it again so I'm not scared to do it again the next time I come back. Okay, that's what guiding principles are. Reasoning and reactions are very tied to a context, a specific point in time when something is happening. They're the things that happen then. It could be the point in time, could be like over several weeks, and you're making a longer decision, and you keep returning to this inner thinking and thinking it through a little bit farther. But it's tied to that point in time. The guiding principle is generally more ongoing. And I almost wrote constant, and then it turns out half the time I hear people talking about how they're going against their guiding principles. Like in this case, then, I am going to leave the pool right away because that's just not worth it. So we like go against our guiding principles a lot because we're human, right? So we change all the time. So what we're doing in a listening session is we're listening for the types of things that are being said. We're not listening for the meaning of what's being said. We're not trying to derive insights. We're trying to understand if we're at depth. And let's just make sure that we're at depth. And if we're trying to forge some sort of meaning or get some sort of insight, it's going to bias the way that you listen, and it's going to cause you to create assumptions. And this is where a lot of our research that we do, our formal research, actually goes wrong. We let ourselves curate the conversation as it's going on. Instead, what we're going to do is let that person curate the conversation. Let that person talk about their inner thinking, help and encourage that person to get down into what was going through their mind and their heart and how they were making decisions in various contexts. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. It's very different. It's that heavy hat, right, that we're putting on. So this is all about recognizing depth. Now, I want to do a little exercise, but I think first I have a chance, because I see some chats coming up. Does anybody have a certain question about what I just went through? No? Okay, good. What I will do is we will dive into an exercise which will help us try to taste what it's like to recognize whether something is at surface or at depth. Again, we're going to have like that structure. Oh yeah, let's compete. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see if, I'm already trained enough for it. So just let that go. Let's just have fun. This is a fun time. So what we're going to be doing is looking at some quotes like what I just read. And we're going to look at them together. I'll read them out loud and we'll sort of think about it. And then you can write down on paper whether you think it's surface or depth, but I'd like you to say out loud, I'll indicate, is it surface or is it depth? And you can say what you think it is, and then I'll ask for some explanations. And then we'll discuss, okay? So this first one, these days, when I see truck drivers, I think you're paying rapt attention to the road. You help those of us who are not. You're such good people. I feel so grateful. So think about that one. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that the sort of context of this whole study is near-miss accidents. So this is something that I heard someone tell me during a listening session about near-miss accidents. Okay, so is this at surface or is it at depth?
Surface.
Okay, why do you think it's at surface?
It feels general and like opinion and explanation. It seems really personal, but at the same time, it seems like it's projecting a lot.
Yeah, it's right on the edge. It is a generalization. Exactly. There's the bit about like, I feel so grateful. So there's a poll tab that we can use to like go back in time and see when she started this emotion. Like, how did this form? Right? Like, why do you think this about truck drivers? And then we can hear that whole story and what went through her mind during that near-miss accident. Very cool. What about this next one? I was walking around and I got lost. I wasn't even on the right street yet. The shops were really small and close to each other. They looked like they were selling junk and cheap knockoffs. I was scurrying along and I had to step out in the street to get around a knot of people in front of one store. And that's when I realized there was this guy following me. Surface or depth?
Surface.
Surface.
Surface? You want to tell me why?
there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of storytelling, but I don't know like what this person's thinking about it.
Yeah,
I don't know what their reaction is.
Good. There's a lot of scene setting. There's an implied emotion at the end. Totally sneaky little implied emotion. Do you know what that emotion is? Fear, right? Sneaky little one. Oftentimes we don't come out and say what our emotion is, at least in this culture. So we're really good at sneaking an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, tons of scene setting at the very beginning. What about this one? I'm on the train when a big muscly dude comes into the car and starts glaring at everyone. To me, it means I should expect violence. I was thinking that if he tried anything, I wanted other people to be aware of him before anything happened. So I started making a noise that would make people look up, crinkling my water bottle.
Yeah.
Depth. We've got a depth. You want to tell me why?
Seems like a guiding principle.
Yep, you got it.
To be aware. Yeah.
You got it. Nice one. And to be clear, guiding principles don't come out in conversation very often. You kind of have to set the scene for them, help people get to depth. It's really interesting. When I do these studies, the majority of the concepts that I pull from transcripts, from study transcripts, are emotions and inner thinking. Very few guiding principles, but they're there. They're just less common. Fun though. What about this? I just don't get along with my two coworkers. My boss keeps calling me into her office about it and trying to get me to work it out. And I try, but it doesn't help. Those guys are just nuts. Surface or depth?
I feel like surface.
Yeah, why?
It's right now it seems like scene setting and just observation, saying the boss keeps trying to help. But just coming to an outright conclusion, those guys are nuts without yet sharing why.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an opinion too. Those guys are nuts. Right? So yeah, we don't have it yet. This is kind of like the beginning, and now we've got a bunch of things we can dive into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for more listening. So again, a listening session has no list of questions, but your questions present themselves. It's like, well, what do you mean those guys are nuts? Or you could have started like, oh, well, what went through your mind the last time your boss tried to get you to work it out? Well, tell me about that. So the questions present themselves. Okay, what about this one?
Indi, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The example that you gave, isn't that probing? Aren't you then making some sort of judgment and leading in a particular way? Like, what's that line between really and picking some direction?
Yeah, what we're doing is we are picking some direction to get somebody to depth because we've noticed that they're only at surface. So we're just trying to invite them to speak more about their inner thinking. And that's the only kind of probing that I do, is to invite them to talk about something more at depth. Oftentimes I'll choose at random and people will automatically tell me the other answers because they've started to unpack it. Now it takes a little while. I can't get into it in this little class, but it takes a little while to build rapport and trust so that somebody will go down there. There's ways to do it. Sometimes you break it and you have to rebuild it again during the listening session. Takes usually between 7 and 13 minutes to get there, but it can be done, and people will start answering all the questions. It's really beautiful. Super intense. Let's look at the next one. Being scared comes after the fact. I've heard a war reporter talked about this on a radio interview, and it was like after the fact that you get scared about being so close to almost being killed. Surface or depth?
Surface.
Yeah, why would you say that, Cody?
It's sort of talking about someone else talking about how they're feeling. It's not like them talking about themselves. It's like using themselves in the third person.
You got it. Exactly. Nicely done. And we could use this bit to sort of, go back to when that person was listening to the radio interview and see what they were thinking then. and see if that had any bearing, because they might have thought about something that actually happened in their own life, and then we can use that as a way to go. Nice. Okay, I think we've got one more. This morning, the road was icy and I slid out. I started feeling embarrassed that I couldn't control the car during the slide. So when I got home from work that night, I looked up tips about driving on ice. Surface or depth?
I think it's depth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why?
Because the person is narrating a specific event that was happening really to that person.
Yep.
And how she or he feels.
Yes, it was, you got it. It was that emotional reaction in that moment. Embarrassment.
Also, maybe the action maybe will be inner thinking, like what they should do for avoiding that
yeah
situation.
So yes, exactly. So that night I decided to look it up, so then we start going into some inner thinking there. Yes.
So would that be inner thinking, or would it be guiding principles? Because to me it kind of seems like, okay, well, if the thing happens and you're you need to react to it, then like the guiding principle is you need to be able to do it better next time.
Could be. We'll see. That may come out more. She doesn't say it right here. She just says the inner thinking about looking it up and the emotion. And as she's telling us more about it, she may come up with that guiding principle of like, I always want to be prepared.
Right.
I don't want to let it happen again. Yeah, actually, one of the thinking styles that came out of this study was make sure it never happens again. Thinking styles are very based on guiding principles. So cool. Oh, wait, there's one more. So I was in London for the first time on business. I had gotten to my hotel in the morning and then went out again to get some food. I had picked up something at the Tesco and I was waiting at the signal light to cross a busy street. Surface or depth?
Surface.
Yeah, why?
Surface because it's mostly just scene setting. It's retelling the events. We're not getting any emotions of any of those actions.
You got it. It is exactly scene setting. And the very next sentence is going to be about a near-miss accident, one would expect. Okay, good. Thank you all for doing that. I am going to go through the last section, and then we're going to have another exercise and a little rundown. And this next exercise after this section, we're going to actually pair up in breakout rooms. And if you don't want to participate in being in a pair, go ahead and stick it in the chat, because Anna's going to be kind of joining people together right now as pairs as we go through this section, and then we'll do that exercise. So making a person feel heard. Wow. What we do is we use a purpose. We use a purpose as sort of the dotted line perimeter within which any sort of conversation can happen. And the purpose is what we're interested in hearing this person's inner thinking about as they did it. That inner purpose for that study that I just gave you examples about was, well, what went through your mind during a near-miss accident? I could have gotten into time machine and gone back in time and asked my great-grandparents about near-miss accidents. I did a little thing where I asked people to send in pictures of their great-grandparents, which was really fun. So these are some from that. But the idea is that we need a purpose, and that's the only thing we need to start with a listening session. So if you're doing a listening session with stakeholders that you want to get to know, or a stakeholder that you just don't feel as if they hear you, you need to hear them first. And what is your purpose going into a stakeholder listening session? Well, it's to understand what their thinking has been about a certain thing going on at work. Maybe that thing is just a goal that you're aiming toward, or a thing might be building culture, or the thing might be measuring or metrics or something. You know, there's a thing, there's a purpose they're trying to accomplish, and you say, hey, what's been on your mind about this purpose lately? They'll give you some scene setting, some generalizations. You might even be able to use a scene from the recent past where you saw something going on for them, right? Maybe they were in a meeting, you saw on the screen, or you saw in some emails, something's going on for this person. I want to listen. I want to hear you. Something was going on for you there. Can you tell me what was on your mind? I want to get into it so I really understand this better. That's your offer to listen. Okay. So it doesn't matter when, because these purposes are bigger human purposes. They're not about using a certain tool, like a claim at an insurance company, which tool probably didn't exist for our great-grandparents, right? But that tool exists now. It's not about necessarily filling out a claim. It's about the purpose of, I want my life back the way it was before the accident, or I want that other person to take the blame. These are purposes, and these are purposes that anyone, anywhere in time, probably has had. One of the things about especially tech is that we seem to feel that since tech is new, everything that it solves is new. We have this idea that, like, oh, we're going to show you how to do this, where somebody's actually been communicating or, you know, writing essays or, you know, doing these things for eons. They already have experience with it. They already have inner thinking about it and guiding principles and emotional reactions. Find out those and let's support those. Because right now, we're really only supporting an assumption of what's going through people's minds in many cases. Okay, so it is much easier for someone to talk about a purpose when you ask them about a specific point in time. It's harder to talk in generalities unless it's that person's habit. I have definitely been in listening sessions where we just did generalities the whole time, and I still got some emotional reactions and guiding principles and some inner thinking out of it. It just wasn't as rich. There wasn't as many. So this is how I ask these questions. So your thinking was, your reasoning, what was going through your head, what was your thinking there, what were you concerned about, what was going through your mind then? Was all around the purpose that we've sort of broached. We've brought up this purpose, and I want to know what was going through your mind. I'm sort of priming them to start telling me a little bit about what was going on interior. So the challenge is that there's no list of questions. I've mentioned there's no list of questions and several times so far, and I do get a little bit of fear from people who have who have been in interviews and felt the pressure. And oftentimes you're told, okay, there's no list of questions. And then I stick you into a little trial listening sessions. And the person's like, I spent all my time thinking of the next question to ask, and I wasn't paying attention to them. Oops. You know that about yourself. So it's a trap that we will fall into again and again, but we can train ourselves out of it for a listening session. Okay, not to be listening about the next question. I mean, not to be thinking about the next question, but listening, paying rapt attention. I'm not thinking about anything else except what that person's saying, what that person's, in a way, if they're taking me on a tour of the city, they're walking past this church, but they're describing this other building, but I know from something else they said churches were important, and so I'm just going to write the word church down. That's my only note. I'm recording this. Now, if it's a situation where you're doing it with a stakeholder, you're probably not going to record it, not going to get away with that. But when you walk out, you can write down a list of inner thinking, guiding principles, and emotional reactions that you heard. Write those down right after. Okay, so rapt attention. Here's a little example of this. I'm speaking to someone about their cooking, They are a creative chef, and I was asking them about cooking dinner. And she had told me how advanced she was as a chef. And it's a little bit of an arms race with taste, I'm afraid. Like you keep getting better, you keep eating better and better things, and you start craving the most amazing thing next. Like after eating at like some fancy restaurant this year, I think I might be almost done with fancy Michelin restaurants. They can't do all that much better. Or no, they can't do all that much that I can't do or that I can get elsewhere. There's a few things that I just don't want to bother with, like searing foie gras, but that's an expensive ingredient. I can't afford to get enough of it to gain that skill. So I just let somebody else do that for me. I'm a pretty damn good cook. So it's kind of sad to spend that much money on a meal and go, okay. And I said, I made this last Monday. She's like, well, not quite that cool, but I've eaten better. I'd still eat at Chris Cosentino's place in San Francisco because it's small and it's casual and it's less expensive, and I can eat 3 courses instead of 18, blah, 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 blah. But notice that thing in the middle that I did. That wasn't even a question, but it was a question, right? It's a connecting sort of a thing. It's a rapport building thing. It shows that I'm paying rapt attention. Okay, there's something that William Miller talks about with regard to reflection, which is being able to further the conversation or say the next sentence in the paragraph. I do a version of that, but I call it micro-reflecting because we don't have time because we're paying rapt attention to actually further it, but we can at least do a micro-reflection like this. I talk more about that in my book and in my courses. So the 3 things that we're allowing our brain to do during a listening session is pay rapt attention. The other one is to help the speaker get to a point in time because it's just easier for them to think about or talk about, explain their inner thinking, and then help get them down past the surface. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything else. Okay, it's interesting. It's a different set of things that we're listening for. So what I want to do now is allow us to have a little listening comparison. We got to listen in the beginning to Rachel and Natalie have like a conversation, and it had a little bit of questioning and probing in it. And it was really fun at the end, and we got to get some opinions and some laughter. Let's have a similar one where we're pairing up, but this time let's try to really listen raptly. Channel your beginner's mind. Let go of that structure that's around you. Let go of your superpower of probing and see if you can tell whether they're at surface or depth, and see if you can help them get to depth. Now, this is a little bit of a rigged thing because you're all aware of what's depth. And so hopefully it'll go easily because the person who's the speaker will know that they need to get to depth and they will make it easier for the listener. So what we're going to do is this screen is going to go away when you get into your breakout room. So take a look at these topics. These are purposes. Decide on a big purchase. This is over to the right. Make a difficult decision. Take a skills course, plan a visit to family, choose one of these, change the way I exercise. I've gotten some good conversation out of that. Decide to attend or go to something, like Natalie went to a restaurant, land a job or land a project. So one of these topics, scribble it down. That might be the thing that you speak about. Now, as a pair, you both don't have to speak about the same thing. Just say what you're going to speak about. When I pair you up, take a minute to say hi, to find out about the other person, to like say, oh, hey, I'll go first. No, you go. Yeah, okay, I'll be the speaker first, right? Just that kind of thing. Set that up and just say, hey, you know, how are things in your life within a minute? Because we're going to use 7 minutes to actually listen. And then I'm going to tell you, swap roles, and the listener becomes the speaker, chooses their own topic, and the speaker becomes the listener. And you might even take 30 seconds in between to kind of laugh or something, right? sort of like flush it all. So let's go ahead, and I will be communicating timing to you through the little breakout session communications. And hopefully this will work, and you'll automatically be pulled back into this main session after the breakout is done. Okay, before I press the button, or before Anna presses the button, I'm going to stop sharing and just make sure, is there any question before we pop into this?
Indi, could I ask a quick question? This is Phyllis. I plopped this in the chat, but and maybe you'll touch on this a bit later on, but I understand the notion of not having a list of questions, but I'm wondering a bit about whether there still is sort of an A question. I think you've actually just sort of answered this with the framing of this exercise. So, and if so, if you might have some suggestions about how to best frame a listening session to put a participant or a person at ease, so that they're not, I mean, I've seen sometimes when I've taken a more generative approach that folks are like, what are we talking about? I'm feeling kind of nervous. What are you going to ask me about? So it's something I just wanted to touch on and kind of put out
I
there.
don't have time to get into that. There is a lot of stuff there that I teach how to do. It's called a generative question, and it's based on the purpose. So these topics that I listed are related to that purpose I was talking about, that we could go back in time, in a time machine, to ask our great-grandparents. A purpose is the way that we frame the germinal question. Also, I use something called spoken screeners. So I'm not on the phone with a person in a study for the first time in a listening session. We've already had a little time to build a relationship in a spoken screener. So that's just two super quick points how I do it.
Indi, is there time for another question?
Sure. So
the question I had is, how far back can people reveal their inner thinking? So like if it's something 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah,
it's around an event that maybe wasn't as emotionally charged as a near miss?
If it's clear to them, they'll say it. If you have to probe for it, then they're imagining and making up something for you. Does that make sense, the difference there?
So what if the thing you're interested in is the thing that they're not so interested in?
Then they're not going to be a participant.
Got it.
Yeah, they don't have anything to say about that purpose.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Sorry, there is a question. Should we leave camera off or kind of use audio?
Oh, yeah, do what you like. If you you can agree on it. Maybe both get on video together the first and just say hi for a minute. And I'm going to actually time you. And then I'll say minutes up. We got to get started. And then you can agree during that minute whether you want to have the video on or off. Okay.
Okay, so we are ready. We have nicely paired rooms. I'm sorry if someone will be still brought up to the room because I may miss something. Someone just don't join the room, stay here, it's okay. And I will just pair people in real time. Okay, so let's go.
Okay, let's see how this works. Thank you, Charles. Okay. And Anna, how do you write messages to people in the breakout room?
Okay, yes, I think there should be, I have this broadcast a message to all.
Okay.
You probably don't have that, but you can,
okay.
Yeah, I can do it for you.
Yeah. I will start the timer, but it looks like you still have to pair some people or?
Okay, so there's a couple people done. Yeah, I will move people around a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they're not in pairs. And everyone else probably just want to stay here with us. I think so. Continue. And it's fine. Yeah, just you don't have to go.
Yeah, you don't have to go. I wanted to give that option.
Yes. Okay. I think we have, oh no, not everyone in pairs. Okay, trying to.
No, the pressure's on, huh?
Yeah, I think it looks good now.
Okay, good. And we are coming up on our minute in 7 seconds. You can post a message saying minute's up, let's get started, or just say minute is up. Go ahead and start. Okay.
Just we'll switch in 1 minute, yeah?
Yeah. And then as soon as you do that, I'm starting my 7 minutes. Okay, let me know when that message goes out.
Yeah, I just sent it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Awesome. Yay. I wish I could see that interface.
It's really inconvenient. It's like a lot of, yeah, it's not really optimized for this use case when some people don't want to join and like you really want to keep people in pairs. So like it's a little like manual work.
Yeah. Actually, I just saw your message. The minute was up, over. So start the listening session now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Can we ask you questions now, Indi?
Sure, I think.
So for the kind, for the kind of research that we do, it's oriented towards having to understand a specific situation that our customers have had to go through. So it's not really their intent or their purpose, but they are the people that we have to contact. So when do you differentiate between a research with questions and a listening deep session?
So you've heard of, there's evaluative research, there's generative research. Those are both about solutions and ideas. And then there's opportunity research or problem-based research. Now you can use a listening session in any of those kinds of research types. And often, like I just attended a course yesterday about when to decide which research type to use, because if you go to my Twitter feed, you'll see way back in there one of the diagrams that I posted about all the different types of data gathering techniques and how they fall into these different sections of generative, evaluative, which are both in the solution space, and opportunity or problem-based research. You can use listening in any of them, because even your customers have a purpose. Even if, say, it's employees at your own organization and they're told you have to use this tool to do X, what's X? How did they do X in the past? Why are they doing X the way that they're doing X? And so you can find out a little bit more about that purpose, especially if you talk to them about the overall goal, not like the evaluative use of the thing, but even when they're using it, even when you have an evaluative, like say a usability session going on, you're like, okay, usually it's like, okay, I'm going to take you through a series of things that I want you to accomplish using this tool, and I want you to talk out loud as you're trying to do it so that we can find out where you get stuck. So instead, you could start that by saying, hey, you've got X that you have to get done, right? Here's the tool. How would you accomplish X, or how would you accomplish X.1 or subpart of X, and see if they can do that. And then also ask them to talk about the last time they did X themselves, and what was everything they were going through their minds as they were doing that part of X. Yeah, so I've done this kind of research with a lot of people. One group most recently was at Cisco, and they were trying to understand how people were using IT, which is really broad. I just taught a course about how to frame your study. Too broad, too narrow, that kind of a thing. And so that's a lot of what I talk about in that class, but then they're like, well, how do we do it? Because it's just, tech upon tech upon tech. And I'm like, they've got a purpose. Like, what's one of the things that they're doing maybe is taking care of new employees and employees who have left to make sure that we keep the system secure. That's my purpose, right? Was all the things that I thought about the last time that I did that purpose. Does that help?
So you're basically saying that you narrow down on the purpose for that conversation or for that purpose, for that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then use that as a starting point to understand more around that purpose for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe go back in time and, you know, even go back a year or two and using different tools, but you still have that purpose.
Yeah. But I mean, that would come down to like asking them why, right? Like why, and often when you ask a why question very straight up, wouldn't that result in like biased responses?
Yeah, I would try not to ask a why question. I would ask the thinking questions. What went through your mind?
Okay.
Yeah. Let me check our time. We have a minute left basically for this listening session, and then what your message, Anna, will be is please switch roles. 7 minutes is up. Please switch roles, or just please switch roles. That'll work. You can get it queued and then I'll tell you. Cool. Yeah, hopefully there's some presentations that I have recordings of on my website, Arcana, that talk about and show that diagram of all the different data collection techniques and kind of like why you would want to go into the problem space, which is where I do most of my research. You can still use listening, though, in generative and evaluative as well. But
sorry,
those...
I missed what you were saying initially.
Oh yeah, on my website, I have recordings of talks where I talk about this specifically. Yeah, so those might be super helpful. And okay, Anna, let's send that message now. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, awesome. And then I'll let people have a little laugh. Maybe tell them, have a little laugh. And then we'll give another message that says start the next listening session. I'm not seeing your messages show up anymore, so phooey. Okay, one of the things I ran into with the last time I was trying to make messages in Zoom chat was somehow I was sending it not to everyone.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't see it's like goes to person.
Yeah, exactly. And then that person's all like, Indi. Like, oh, sorry. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the timer again.
Okay. So what should I send them?
Yeah, start the next listening session. Okay. Cool. Okay, I saw that message. I wonder why I didn't see your earlier ones. Huh. Technology.
Yeah, I probably will. There's one person. I will try to move them.
Okay.
Oh, Kelly, so sorry I couldn't find pair for you. I'm very sorry for that.
Do you want to pair up together, Anna and Kelly?
Yes, if
Kelly... Or you could just do it here. I'll listen.
It's fine. Yeah, I just was checking because I was joining the room and nobody else was joining. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm sorry. and I cannot message you when you're in breakout waiting. It says me like you're in a meeting, and I cannot message you like, please come back to the main room.
Oh,
because I just tried it a second time in case somebody was joining, but then it was just me. So.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Ooh. Where are you dialed in from?
From Seattle.
Oh, Seattle! Yay! How is it in Seattle?
It's good. It's starting to get like cloudy and kind of dark. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Seattle. Is that a background or is that your actual plants?
No, it's my apartment.
Really? You have your plants backlit? They're so pretty.
Yeah. Oh no, it's like dark. So I had a lamp turned on and try and make it a little more energizing. But yeah, lots of plants.
Yeah. Oh my God, it looks like one of those professional backgrounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice. Why all the plants?
I have like the southwest facing window. It's kind of like I feel like a collection.
Right.
You go to go to the hardware store, pick up something else like every single time.
What went through your mind last time you were there when you picked one up?
Probably like, do I really need this and where will I put it? Because I was in the studio.
How did you decide? What was it too?
Probably some sort of weird cactus thing. And I have a patio. So I was like, I can put it on the patio. And then I'm like, oh wait, it's going to be winter soon. So where am I actually going to put it?
Right.
It's going to die. So.
Because what? Cactuses can't go outside?
I think just like things that need a lot of sun. And I was like, well, it needs like heat and sun. And I don't think and do I really need to spend this amount of money on a plant too?
Right. Oh yeah, there is that. I know. Why are cactuses so expensive?
Yeah. Like look at them and you're like, this is like $120. I have no idea why.
How did it attract your attention in the first place?
I think just like looking cool. Like that's when I don't have or probably seen on Instagram or something like that. It's usually it.
Right. Wow. So it caught your eye. And what do you mean by Instagram? Seen on Instagram?
Like there's lots, I don't know, like you see like different plants on Instagram. It's like how we discover like everything. Like you see it in somebody else's house and you're like, that looks like something, you saw on like some website or social media.
Oh my gosh.
Like plant trends or something.
Right. Something I was completely unaware of.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a plant behind you that's from a plant trend?
Like probably this one. It's like the Monstera that was very popular with like the cut out leaves. So they had a lot of those at like Home Depot.
So when you bought that one, what was going through your mind?
It was a good, I think it was a good deal for the size. At the time it was like $20 or $30 for something that was like pretty, like, I don't know, maybe 2.5 feet tall. So,
oh, wow.
Good value.
Yeah.
Foliage.
That is awesome.
Sorry, do you think we need to message them?
We are at 2 more minutes still.
Okay.
Yeah, you can actually say 2 more minutes in the message if you want. Yeah.
And then we will bring them back.
Then we'll come back. And then we've got just a couple more slides. So good. Kelly, I want to understand like why plants? Where did that come from?
I think it's like, I don't know, maybe not instead of art, but like it's a different way to decorate than art and like bringing the outdoors inside since I like the outdoors. So.
Okay. Indoors, outside. I mean, the outside, indoors. Good Lord. Mm-hmm. I'm tripping on my words.
Yeah.
Why?
Like different interesting shapes and stuff with like leaves and things draping. So it just adds, I don't know, sort of natural visual interest.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. So different shapes inside the box that you've got inside, like the planes of the walls and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Nice. When did you start it?
I had like a roommate I never really thought about getting plants that much. And then I had roommates who were into plants and I was like, all right, like I might not kill this.
Because you killed a lot of other things.
It's just like, yeah, like trying to, I don't know. I think I assumed that I inherited that from my parents, not being able to keep stuff alive.
Oh my God, thank God they kept you alive.
Yeah. Or at least keeping plants alive, like pets.
Oh yeah.
Fine, but
okay.
Maybe not like, yeah, no green thumb, definitely more of a black thumb in terms of keeping like herbs and stuff. So I kind of expected, like I probably don't have that either.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. So that was just sort of an assumption. Sorry, I'm keeping time too. We are at 1 second. Let's pull people back. Can you do that with one button? Is that doable? Awesome.
Yeah, and then a 10-second countdown.
Okay. Oh, I see. We have to do a 10-second countdown. I should have told you it 10 seconds ago.
I did it. It's great.
Woohoo! All right. Do we know whether everybody's back yet?
I think so. Yes, I think everyone is back.
Okay. All right. I want to hear, how did that go? Anyone?
Okay.
Yes, Bernadette.
I felt I was easy to just not say anything and just listen, but I felt like I should be doing something, and I'm not sure that I was it just difficult to not speak and to know if I was doing it right, and was I here, but I'm still trying to hear for those things. So
yeah. You're all caught up in all those strings.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you heard the other person?
Oh yeah. It was lovely. It was really lovely.
What was lovely about it?
Just hearing a story that was going on that wasn't sort of peppered by kind of like, tell me about this, tell me about that. What did you mean by that? It was unfolding and getting a little deeper. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Anybody else have thoughts?
I can kind of add in
Yeah.
that same vein. I think it felt relaxing, right? It took the pressure off to not have to be thinking about what am I going to ask and where do I need to pick up something to dig into, but I can just sit and take it in and listen to what she's saying to me.
Sweet. Do you feel like you heard?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. The people who were paired with Bernadette and Daphne, do you feel as if you were heard?
Yeah, I was paired with Bernadette. I definitely felt like I was heard. I will say it was interesting though, and I'm sort of a natural chatterbox, so I talk a lot. So, I was kind of waiting for the questions to be asked, and they came once I stopped talking, but I feel like I'm much more used to having someone ask about something as I'm telling a story or talking about something.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna. Well, I work with Cody actually, so I'm just gonna hop in here. But as someone who is used to talking to someone and asking a lot of questions, it was really hard. I felt like I had to hold back. Or when earlier you said, don't say stuff like, "Oh, don't worry about that," and like invalidating them. So I had to hold back from saying something that I'm used to thinking is empathetic, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, okay, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone have something similar to what was said so far, something different?
Sarah and I were partnered together, and my piece of that, at some point I'm like, wow, I'm just talking. But it was this incredible gift of allowing, like, I went in my story someplace that I completely did not expect, and it was a revelation. So thank you so much, Sarah. And yeah. It was
Yay. Awesome. Oh my God, that happened in 7 minutes. That's fantastic. Anyone else?
I agree with Sarah, just that I had, like, when I was talking, I was like, I'm just talking, like, this isn't a conversation. This feels a little weird.
Right.
I feel like I'm talking in circles because like this is like troubling thing that I'm trying to go through, a big decision. And
yeah, yeah. And hopefully you got to explore it a little bit more, but yeah, yeah. So usually, I'll open it up again to more comments, but usually when I do this exercise, it's a bit fraught. It's like, I got caught up in thinking about things I wasn't supposed to, or I feel like I was talking in circles, or, you know, it was different. It's different. And then usually on my longer ones, I'll do this exercise again and again. And by the end, it like starts to fit. That's the cool part. We are at the top of the hour, so I'm actually going to share my screen and then I'll open up to more questions at the end, just to share the last 2 slides, which is all about practice. So anytime you play something, especially if you want to really play it, you like to practice. You like to do it again and again and sort of make it so that you, when you're out there doing it, you don't have to think about it so hard. So a sport, playing music, anything, it's like you can't practice by just learning what the rules are. You actually have to do it. So where are the places that you can practice? Where are the places I would like to think about some ways, like you might be standing in line with some other people and you could sort of turn to somebody and start up some sort of a listening session about the purpose of standing in the line. Or you might be going to lunch and you could find somebody new to sit with, or you might be waiting. This is at the end down here of a race. So you're all there together. You know, you're not a stalker. But you can also do it with debates. If you're watching debates, you can really listen and start to hear what people are saying. It's really interesting, especially with debates. Some of that, choose some less presidential ones. But think about places. I do this all the time. I still practice because it's that muscle that I want to keep developed so that I can wear that heavy hat for an hour or 2 when I do study listening sessions. Okay. So that's what's interesting about listening, is that it is a practice that you form, much like a practice of, you know, being kind to someone, or other kinds of practices. So there's 2 different ways of using the word practice. But I want to thank everyone for today's time together. Here is a special discount code for you, Bright Nectar 20. It is good for any Rosenfeld Media book. I had to convince them of that because they thought that everybody would just want to buy mine. I'm like, no, they already have mine. So any Rosenfeld Media book, spread that around your team if you would like. I'm here in all of these places. Please come to my brand new website, which we just launched at the beginning of September, and take advantage of all the materials there and help us find bugs. So thank you very much. I will say goodbye to who has to leave, and I'll stick around a little bit for if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Indi. It was really awesome. I'm really happy we're recording this so everyone can come back and maybe just kind of, you know, get inspired again. Because I think this skill, like, I really like how you kind of, you know, set the stage. Like, I think it's something we want to come back and listen again and just really keep in mind.
Yay! And this will be linked from my website as well as the IxDA San Francisco website.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
We'll send recording right after. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So when you're listening, I felt like it was hard to, which was intentional, that, you know, not think of the questions that I wanted to ask. For my work, if I'm working, I work as a UX designer. How should I apply it to my job where I'm supposed to fill in the gaps while I'm talking to a user?
Who told you you're supposed to fill in the gaps when you're talking to a user?
Because that's what we set out to. Like, we have a hypothesis and we want to make sure we cover that.
Yeah.
So when I'm listening, yeah, it was hard.
There's a good talk that I give, which is recorded on my website twice, 2 different conferences that talks about the difference between inductive and deductive research. And if you're being told that you need to do deductive research by set out a hypothesis and try to disprove it, there's other ways to do research. And you may want to explore kind of like how these other data collection techniques go. Listening sessions is an abductive technique. So it's a way of collecting things that you don't know to ask for. Yeah.
That actually sort of answered the question I was going to ask as well. When you're talking about not probing, it kind of felt like, what about sometimes when you're in a team and they're like business managers or engineers or somebody really driving the agenda to say we need to test something, or you know, to really advocate for user research when there's pressure from within a business that's about, well, we can't do this or spend money on this unless we know what we're trying to learn.
Right. So this is going to be the next big thing that I try to write about after I finally get the Thinking Styles book out. Thinking Styles is actually a course on my site too. So that's available in that format. The book will come. The next thing though is all about the stakeholders and the pressure. And really it's all about helping them recognize that in their training, they were not told about inductive or abductive research. So there's a lot more to be found out than just using deductive techniques. However, there are times when deductive techniques are correct. Deductive is about testing or disproving a hypothesis. How did you make that hypothesis? How did you know what to choose as a hypothesis? What are all the things you didn't choose? Where are all your assumptions? And those are found through inductive and abductive research. So this is a great, it's really first form your relationship with people so that they know you understand them, and then they will try to understand you if it's that kind of a scenario. And so that's the next big thing that I want to try to work on with everybody, because everybody's facing this. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Yay. Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up.
Yes, I have one question. Also, thank you for the workshop today. It was very awesome, and
Yay.
I really love your book. Also, I wanted to ask you if you have any recommendation about the generative question, like where can I like keep looking for more like references, or where can I start like also training that skill to define how to start everything?
Yeah, so the germinal question that I use at the beginning of the listening session comes out of an exercise that we do when you're framing your study. And it's a series of exercises about expanding and contracting. What's the knowledge that we need here, truly? And we need a lot of knowledge. So we can't just say we need everything. We have to set up a series of studies. Those studies will either be evaluative or generative. Both of those are in the solution space about solutions and ideas, or it will be an opportunity type of research, which is also called problem space research or futures research in the ethics area. I do have a talk about that, which I just mentioned, so that'll help lay it out, because I don't have time today to lay it out. But that germinal question comes out of framing your study. It comes out of how you figure out which study we need to do now in this situation. Oftentimes you'll be in organizations that think, hey, we've got a process and it spins. And sometimes we've got certain things along the spinning that help this other spinning process, like if we're doing design and development and continuous dual track or something, right? But all of that process is in the solution space. And so all of the research they think to do is evaluative or generative. And while you can use listening, and I highly encourage you to use listening and a germinal purpose-based question at the beginning of an evaluative session, like a usability session, go for it. That's going to make your usability deeper if you tie it to the thing that person's trying to get done. But when you're deciding what kind of research to do, what knowledge you need, it might be evaluative that you need. It might be the thing that you need is the thing you don't know what you need, which is problem-based research or opportunity research. I mean, the last class that I taught, a lot of people were being told by their bosses, hey, we need to be more inclusive. Diversity and inclusion, let's do that. And so they're like, well, we need to understand what that means. And we have to figure out how to frame that question. You can't just go like, oh, well, tell me about diversity and inclusion. That's not a purpose, right? So we have to frame it around a purpose.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I feel we need to do one more workshop with you. Even couple of them. It's like all
I know.
amazing questions. So
right.
To learn.
Exactly. So our field is growing so fast. I'm super excited because all sorts of people are joining it. And so what I want is everybody to have like this critical thinking ability. Most people are coming at it because they've got critical thinking, and here's how we can apply it. And here's how we can do it. Now, the other thing is the stakeholders going like, no, just do this, just do the process. And I'm like, well, hang on, we can actually do better.
I have a question. You said you did some empathic listening session with family. So I'm curious to know how can I do such sessions with my family to understand them even better?
Yeah. Okay, we'll take my mom as an example, who has a different political bent than I have. So we're both interested in speaking. We're both interested in having a relationship. It's hard to do it with a family member who is not interested in having a relationship. And so we get on the phone once a week and I listen to her and she's starting to listen to me. We don't talk about politics so much as what's important to you. She just went out to a restaurant and I wanted to know all of her inner thinking, why she ordered the French onion soup and that sort of thing. And she's building her own capacity to actually think about what her inner thinking was and to say it out loud, which was not something she was taught. And so this I think is making her feel heard and possibly helping her understand herself a little bit better. I don't know. So I don't know if that's just the example that I could use, but that's how I'm doing it. There's a lot of different ways to do it depending on your family, depending on who it is.
So thank you. But if they are living in the same household, like I have a young son, like he's in 3rd grade. How would I listen him better, understand him better?
Yes. So there's actually a book that I heard one of the participants tell me about, learning how to listen to your kids. I don't know what the title is. I would have to look that up. But apparently, so when I do listening with kids, the kid is in the same spot as my mom is, unable to really talk about their inner thinking because they've been taught so far to have the right answer. So especially if it's with your own kid, being able to slowly switch it up to allow them to understand that you are not judging them, to allow them to understand that they can truly talk about their inner thinking. Maybe stay away from emotions or maybe go towards emotions, depending on the kid, right? Everybody's different. And that is a small person there. So give yourself a choice of where you want to focus, emotions or inner thinking that works best for them. And slowly over time say, over and over, just practice it. Hey, what went through your mind there as you did that? Or what went through your mind that time that you're talking about where you were at school or you were playing and this thing happened that upset you, right? Does that help?
Yes,
Okay.
it kind of helps. I can try that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that the raising an emotionally intelligent child?
That, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I could maybe tell Anna if I actually.
I can follow up on that, yeah, and I will send a mail to everyone who joined with recording, and there's also a book from.
I could actually. I think it's right here. It's called "How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen," which actually flips it midway, by Adele Faber. See, I told you I could look it up. There.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
Let's everybody have a great day. Remember, you can't be a listener all the time. It's a special hat. But if you practice with it, you'll be able to remember to reach for it more often.
Thank you so much for staying a little longer with us, and it was a really awesome morning with you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody for whom it is not morning.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Indi.
Thank you.
Thank you.